The Ensombl Advice South Africa podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. All discussion is limited to publicly available information and should not be interpreted as legal, professional, or financial advice.
Hi, I'm Louis van der Merwe, Certified Financial Planner. Join me every week where I get to have discussions with global leaders in the financial planning space to help you serve your clients better and run a more efficient financial planning practice. This is the Ensombl Advice South Africa podcast.
Portfolio Metrics is thrilled to bring you this podcast in support of our common passion for people and the evolution of wealth management. Our global business links precision investment management to expert financial advice through partnerships and technology. Portfolio Metrics is an authorized financial services provider. ComSpace is a revenue management solution developed specifically for independent financial advisors. It is a web-based application that tracks, allocates, and manages advisor revenue. The system seamlessly reads commission statements from financial institutions and can address any permutation of commission splits. ComSpace provides mind-blowing, out-the-box revenue business intelligence and analytics, along with super flexible reporting to effectively manage and grow your business.
Welcome to another episode of Ensombl Advice South Africa. Today I have with me in the studio Bari Tessler, and I'm really excited to share today's episode with the listeners because this concept of somatic advice and how things show up in our body is something that connects back to all our money decisions. And Bari, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to start with what a body scan is. And I noticed before our conversation, you took a little bit of a pause before answering the questions that I had. And you were so intentional with the way you show up. Can you share a little bit of what is a body scan? I know I'm jumping right into it, but just to tease the listeners a little bit.
Sure. We can start with what is a body scan, and then we can back up and I can share more of my story and you can understand where it comes from, right? And why I use it. So a body check-in. So some people call it a body scan out in the world. I call it a body check-in. And it's simply a moment of closing my eyes, if I want, or leaving them open, but pausing and letting myself check in my body on a few different levels. So on a physical level, what's going on a sensation level, on an emotional level, and where is my breath? So on a breathing level, where is my breath in my body? Is it shallow? Is it full? Where is it? In my throat? In my chest? And sometimes a body check-in can just be checking in on one of those levels. Check in, what sensations do you notice in your body? Or physically, what's going on? Are your shoulders up? Are they down? Is your jaw loose? Is it tight? Right? And I invite people to do a body check-in in all the daily money moments that we have. So before we're going to have a money conversation with our spouse, before we're going to go online and do some online shopping, before we're going to talk to our kids or our parents about money or make a money decision. I also do a body check-in in the heat of the moment, because sometimes I forget to do it before as prep, but in the heat of the moment, when you're online shopping, when you're in the middle of that money conversation, when you're at the car dealership, a body check-in is wonderful to do. And then I also do body check-ins after the money decision is made, or after the money conversation, or after the money purchase, as a debriefing, as a check-in, to see, what was going on in my body. What am I feeling now? What worked? What didn't? What could I do better? So that's a teeny little glimpse of, what a body check-in is and a little bit of how I use it. Yes, in my work.
Why is that important when we talk about money for us to notice how our body is showing up?
Well, it's very important for me and many of the folks that I work with. And I have to go back, and now I have to go back a little bit to my story and then lead back in. So I trained as a somatic psychotherapist. So I have a master's in somatic psychology, and I spent most of my 20s getting that degree. It was a lot of schoolwork. It was a lot of internship work. It was a very large thesis and so on. Right. And so my entire master's degree is in somatic psychology. And the reason I chose that is because at the age of 16, I asked my parents if I could go see a therapist. I asked my parents if I could go to therapy. I wanted to understand myself better. And they sent me to a male therapist and they sent me to a talk therapist. Now, it was okay as first steps, but neither of those are really a good fit for a teenage girl, or for me, at that time. But I did therapy, and it was a first step. And what was also happening at that time is I would go into my bedroom and play music really loud and dance out all of my emotions, and then come out of the room and then be able to understand and articulate what was going on for me, right? And share that with my parents, and I felt a lot more calm afterwards, right? So for me, there was a year in between my undergrad and before I knew what was next. And that in between was when I was living in Israel for a year. And I was jogging one day outside of the kibbutz that I was living on. And, I thought I made up somatic psychology and dance movement therapy. I grew up as a dancer. I started getting really interested in psychology and therapy. And one day I really said, I'm going to merge those together and do dance therapy. And I really thought I made up an entire field. And then I get to Jerusalem and learn that there's graduate programs in somatic psychology, and I didn't make anything up. But what was great is that there were graduate programs, and and one in Boulder, Colorado, in the States that I could go to. Right. So
someone also made this up just a little bit before you.
Exactly. And I just knew that, one, I stored a lot of things in my body, right? And soon I learned that we all store many things in our body, both beautiful things, painful things, trauma, joy. We experience it in our bodies, and sometimes things get stuck there, left there. I just have learned that checking in with my body is a great tool to help me understand what's going on for myself in the moment. It gives me more information. So it helps other people get out of their heads. And now I love the mind. I don't want to just be operating in the world from my mind or making decisions just from my mind. There's also sensations and feelings and, what our breath is doing. And I can look at someone and watch their facial expressions and their body movements, and someone can watch mine, And so therapy, bringing in somatic psychology into therapy sessions, is just, as a therapist, noticing what's going on in the other person's body and their breathing. Now, I don't always know what that means to them. So I may invite them to say, what do you notice? What do you notice with your breathing right now? Or you just took a deep breath? Or did you notice you just held your breath there? Or what are you noticing in your shoulders or your chest? So it's just inviting someone to notice what's happening in their body. And then they can tell me what that means or what memories that brings up, and so on, right? So everyone's shoulders up does not mean the same thing from my view, right? So it was one of the very first tools that I brought to my financial therapy work. And I realized I needed it because the very first group that I led 22 years ago, the very first financial therapy group, the first evening, I asked people to start talking about their money stories, meaning, let's go right to your family history, family of origin, let's get to it, and I noticed that people just kind of went into a bit of a shock, deer in the headlights. It was too fast, too furious. So the very next evening, this was only a 6-week group, but the very next evening, a week later, I brought in the body check-in.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
What did you see that made you realize that, hey, this is too much too soon?
Well, I've been studying body language, right? So after spending a decade at the graduate program that I went to, we had to be our own case studies. So we had to be in therapy, in individual therapy, in group therapy. We had to lead somatic groups. We had to lead movement groups. We had to do tons of somatic sessions with other people. So I had been studying body language and movement for a long time. So it was obvious to me that everyone was different. It was only, I led very small groups, 10 people in my living room in California at the time. And I just saw the deer in the headlights. I just saw everyone go into somewhat of a freeze, a shutdown, and everyone's body did that a little different. But it was just really obvious to me that everyone was telling me through their body language it was too much too soon. And it didn't feel safe, and they couldn't be brave. And I mean, they shared a little bit, but when I introduced the body check-in, which helps us pause, slow things down, take a moment, get centered. You may notice you're not centered. You may notice you're having really strong feelings. That's fine, right? There's no one way to do a body check-in. There's no right way. Everyone's going to be a little different. You're going to notice something different each time. And really, it's about letting yourself be curious, right? And so that very second evening when I brought in the body check-in tool, and it's not something you do one and done. It's a lifelong practice, right? And I brought it in, invited it, and I could just tell that, everyone took a little deeper of a breath. Or, I could tell that it felt more safe and brave in the space, so that people can then even monitor how much they wanted to share that evening or how little, or, they didn't leave their bodies. I know that first evening that it wasn't just free. Some people just completely checked out. There were lots of different versions of what I saw as too much, too soon. I moved people into overwhelm. So this little tool can help us pause, slow things down, get more in the present moment, right?
It strikes me how curious you must be around how people respond, and how for someone else seeing that, they might not have noticed it without the same training and the same intuition that you've accumulated over time.
Yeah, I was always a noticer and a sensor. So I was doing that to some degree anyway. It was natural for me. But sometimes I would get overwhelmed with that information. That was natural for me to notice. But then I had to learn tools as the therapist on how to work with all of that information, right? Yeah. So that's a little bit about the somatic tools. Now, that's just one tool or practice that I teach people, but it is step one. So when people say to me, tell me about your financial therapy methodology, I know you love to integrate emotional literacy and financial literacy. What's step one? And I always say step one is the body check-in.
Yeah. I noticed how important that is, and how you can just actually ground someone. Would you practice this with every session with a client? I know that a lot of your work is in group sessions, but on a one-on-one session, is there something that a financial planner could take and kind of make their own that might meet their client where, they feel that, okay, this is helping us just get present. It's parking the things that might be in our mind and just noticing what's going on in our body.
I now work with, one of my programs is a mentor program for other therapists and coaches and financial planners, right? And so, yes, I'm inviting financial planners and all the financial professionals to bring these tools into their sessions when it feels relevant, appropriate, when the client seems open to it. But on some level, you don't have to call it a body check-in. You don't have to, right? But yes, you can even do that before you're going to have a session with yourself, right? Or yes, when you sit down with a client, you can just take a moment and just say, let's just take a few seconds here to notice, what you're feeling as we're beginning, right? How about that? Or, and I always end my body check-ins with this tool, which is now called resourcing, from Peter Levine's work, right? But when I graduated from my program, it was 1998. Peter Levine's first book was just coming out, so we didn't study his work, right? So this tool, resourcing, which I've been doing for years and not calling that, is just we would end a body check-in with one little adjustment. Like, what is one little adjustment that you can make in your body right now that would help you feel more present, okayness in yourself, right? Feel more calm. It could be, lowering your shoulders and doing a little shoulder shimmy. That's always one of mine, or loosening my jaw, right? Or making sure the soles of my feet are on the floor. So I always like to end my body check-ins with that. So why did I bring that up in this moment? I don't know why I brought that, why I shared that. Let me check in. What was your question? Let's see. I can always come back to it after a few minutes.
I think it's so beautiful that you just shared like a practical example of how this might work. And what I'm wondering is the kind of space that someone would have this conversation, assuming that it's in person. Like, what are the things that we should maybe pay attention to? Like when we're inviting someone into a meeting room, like I'm assuming a lot of the spaces that people meet with their clients are maybe not conducive to this. Like, are there things that when you meet with someone or with another professional that you think, oh, wow, like they missed this. They really need to pay attention to that?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, all my work is online and has been for, years and years and years. So I don't meet with people live anymore.
Okay.
And I haven't, right? So when I had my son 14 years ago, I needed recovery time after I had him. And my husband got my entire business online. So where I used to do local groups, live groups, or I used to see clients live local, I haven't done that in 15 years, So here's the thing. Number one, with any financial professional or even therapists, we have to do our own money work first. Okay. So we that is step one. It's similar to what do parents do? How do they teach their children how to have a different relationship to money? Well, you need to start working on your own relationship to money first. And even couples individually, and then they can come together. It's very important that they each know what their money styles are and personalities and approaches, have a better understanding of that, and then they can learn how they're different and what their dynamics are, right? And so it's the same with when we're a professional. And here's the thing. We're not going to know everything about money. There's always going to be things to learn. Now, my financial planners or folks who come from more of a traditional financial management background, at first you may all think, you know everything, or you learned a lot of really important things, and there's still missing pieces in your education. And what's the missing piece is one, doing your own money work, is two, money psychology, is to really learning how to work with your clients and have compassionate conversations. I think that's all changing. But, I once worked with a couple and he came from a traditional financial background and she really did not. She was more of a yoga teacher at the time, now turned real estate. He really thought he could be the best teacher for her. And he kept pulling out the spreadsheets to show their numbers. And she was like, get those away from me, And he was like, but I know everything. I've learned all of this. Like you need to listen to me and I'm the best.
The answer.
And I have the answer. It's very black and white, And for her, that's where she brought me in. And he was very skeptical at first, and he didn't understand what was this talk about money emotions and money stories. And it took him a little bit, but he realized, there were some missing pieces from his education. And guess what? A couple usually has two people, have their own styles and approaches to earning and spending and saving and investing. There's not one right way. There really isn't. You both need to listen to each other. And they learned how to have a new kind of money date where they didn't go to the numbers or the spreadsheets first, right? They told stories and shared money memories and what they learned from their parents and their lineage first, then talked about values, and then they moved on to the numbers, right? But the other piece is she really had to learn her own bookkeeping system, not spreadsheets. She had to go off and get a trainer and someone to hold her hand, metaphorically and literally, and teach her how to use, I think it was Quicken, So she felt empowered and can come to the table and say, this is how I'm looking at her numbers, right? And then he got to learn, wow, he actually has some emotions or some childhood memories from his family of origin and had never shared that with her, right? So to come back, I think that, the therapist needs a therapist. The financial planner not just needs a financial planner, but they need a therapist. And So they need to do some of their own money work first, which is what are our triggers, what are our strengths around money, what are our challenges, really understand our money story, right? As some people call money scripts, and start there just so you have more compassion and understanding that, as Rick Kaler and I always talk about, it's either 85% or 90% or 95% of money decisions are based on our emotions, right? We keep seeing different
It's a lot, yeah.
on that. And so if that's the case, then everyone really needs to understand what are the set of emotions or cocktail of emotions that comes up around money. And as a financial planner, you don't necessarily have to go back to school to be a counselor or therapist, but you can go to therapy for a little bit. You can do some of your own work where you can understand that for most people, for most of your clients, it is very emotional. They will make decisions by their emotions. And so learning a few tools or practices to bring into the sessions would be really, really helpful. I always say when you go to a financial planner's office, definitely do a body check-in before you head into the room. Do one in the middle of the meeting, and you might need to go take a bathroom break because that's a great place to do a body check-in. Go take some space, come back, maybe get some water, have a snack, come back in, and then maybe you can be more present and ask the questions that you need, or even when your eyes start glazing over, when they start showing you an investment statement or something, you can say, "Hold on, give me a moment here. I'm going to take a deeper breath," right? So you as the financial planner can just start to notice, what's going on with your client. Are you noticing they're shutting down? Are you noticing they're looking at the budget or plan or, and their eyes are glazing over? Or, right, do you need a moment? Or do you need me to explain this in a different way? Or, what's going on with you right now? Like, are you having any emotions or memories?
I love how you phrase those all as questions, almost like inviting someone to respond instead of just saying, "Oh, let's do a body scan right now."
Exactly. It's an invitation. And
that would probably add to the problem.
It will. They'll go, what? What's a body scan? What does that
It's on the agenda.
Yeah, what does that even mean? So it can be an invitation. You're also inviting yourself to take a deep breath and slow down.
Bari, when we think about clients in a major transition, because often as financial planners and even as a financial transitionist, we're dealing with clients where the issues that they're dealing with are often very emotive and we're seeing them in extreme times of their lives. Does this make it more difficult to have these conversations, these type of conversations, or is that actually why this is so necessary? Because someone is in such an extreme state that they have left their body and they're maybe not back connected.
Yes. Transitions happen for all of us in a long life, right? They do. Births, deaths, loss of job, moving, right? We could name so many, right? Loss of money, increase in money. Like there's so many different ways that like these transitions happen, right? I'm going to tell a little story and give a few tools of how I work through this. Okay. Because whenever sometimes it's a curve, I call it a curveball, but sometimes I call it a transition. It just depends on what it is. Like, were you given some kind of life or money curveball or life curveball that affects your money stuff, right? It's all pretty much interconnected, right? So when in my 20s, my favorite topics were intimacy, relationships, grief, death, sexuality, like all of those topics, I realized my graduate program had never talked about money. And then that became my big topic. I think originally I thought, well, I would never be dealing with those other topics. And those are my favorite. I deal with all those topics. It's just through the doorway of our relationship to money, right? So sometimes I refer to it as a money curveball, like something happens and it surprises you. No one likes to be surprised, right? Another moment, I have all these little ways of saying it. I call it a money koan, Koan, from the Zen Buddhist term which is it's a riddle. There's some kind of riddle that you've been given and you need to figure it out. So you're in a transition or you've had a curveball and it's going to take some time to come to a solution. And you cannot see what that is yet. And so you have to hold it as a riddle, right? So I've, in my book, my first book, there's a whole chapter on money koans and that concept, right? So I'm always kind of evolving how I talk about things, but I'm trying to give people some simple language. Money koan's not so simple, but money curveball is, right? And so that they can hold on to things, think about it in a simpler way and make sense of what's happening, right? So there's ebbs and flows in life and there's ebbs and flows in money. And that was one of those simple aha moments years ago, similar to the same emotions that come up in life and all other areas come up around money, but the ebbs and flows one was huge. Like not every year are we going to earn more and save more and give more. Hopefully we have some of those years, but not all our years. And for most people that I know, right? So within that, there's going to be these curveball moments. And I think number one is just naming, I'm in a transition or a curveball just happened. If we can even just bring awareness to that, that's progress. Because usually what happens at the beginning is we go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? We go into dysregulated nervous system states and we don't know what's happening. It takes us a few days or a few weeks. I had a smaller version of one, I think about 5 years ago, where it was just any nice spring day, walk to my mailbox, opened up my mailbox, and there was quite a few letters from the IRS. And I was being audited for not just my personal finances, but my business finances. All of our entities are being audited. And I had been audited the second year of my business 20 years before, and I call that my cute little audit. This freaked me out. And it took me a good week or two of having trouble sleeping to, one day within let's say 2 weeks of that mailbox, moment, to in the middle of the day, I work from home and I realized I'm going to go take a bath today. Now, because water always helps me, shower, baths, cold showers, hot showers, the whole, it just helps shift my state. And I got in the bathtub, and in the bathtub, I think I was there for 2 hours just hanging out. And it took me just a few minutes to finally name, after a few weeks, I'm in a transition. I'm in a money koan riddle, and it's freaking me out. So I spent like 30 minutes just sitting and naming all the feelings. Why am I'm so angry that this is happening. I want to go running away. I'm freezing and shutting down. I was doing all of it. And then I just named all the different states and feelings first. Then I moved into, what is this reminding me of? Oh, this is reminding me something of my parents and a financial challenge they went through. Oh, this is reminding me of this, right? And so I just sat there, and someone recently called this self-coaching. And I was like, that's a great way to look at it. So I was in the bathtub doing some self-coaching, taking myself through a process I teach about, right? Which is naming the feelings, feeling them, sitting with them, acknowledging them, honoring them. Then after I did that, then I can move into now what are my next steps, or what are my next practical questions? Okay, well, do I have support? Yeah, I have a great accounting team, and they're going to interact with the IRS, and we just have to send them all the documentation, and it doesn't have to be paper anymore like in the olden days. It's all digital, right? So my entire audit, we proved everything from digital receipts, not paper, like my first audit. And do I trust them? Yes, I do. And I just went through all these questions, and they were more spontaneous questions in the moment. I love to ask questions, new questions, and I wound up getting out of that bathtub, not having a solution. It took a few more months to go through that audit, and a few more months for the IRS to come to the conclusion that all of our income and expenses were accepted after tons and hours of paperwork. And there was one gray area, self-employment tax in the US, and accountants could be more risky with that, and my accountant was, and we owed a little bit for that, but all of my income and expenses were accepted, which was very empowering. But getting out of the bathtub that day, I didn't know how that was going to end up. But I got out of that tub at least going through all the emotions and naming them and sitting with them and the memories and what it was bringing up. And then asking questions of what kind of support did I need. And then honoring that I was in a transition, in a money koan that will get resolved at some point. So I basically calmed my entire nervous system in a 2-hour bathtub. Now, you don't have to do that. Everyone's going to have their own version. Go on a walk. Go exercise. Go talk to someone that you trust and feel safe with. There's so many different ways that we can do this. But that's a little bit of how I took myself through a curveball, a riddle that took many months to come to a resolution. And it's essential that you find a way to calm yourself down, even though you're still scared, even though you're still feeling some anger, but to take it down a few notches. And that process that I did in the bathtub is one of the ways that I support people through their own curveballs.
Thank you for sharing that beautiful story. I'm part of a grief coaching group, and they talk about having a temporary break and finding something where a place or something physical you can go to say, hey, I just need to get away for a little bit. And you recreated that. And what strikes me is the fact that you came to the conclusion that, yes, this is temporary. I'm going to get through this. This is something that will pass at some point. And we just need to, follow the path and see where it leads.
Well, they're all temporary. That's the thing. In the moment, it does not feel like that. And so telling ourselves that, but to even tell ourselves that, we have to have awareness that we're in a transition state, right? We have to do some self-coaching and realize the larger view, the larger perspective. There's ebbs and flows. Everything is temporary, but we don't know how long a curveball or riddle is going to last. Some of them are just a few weeks. Some are a few months, and some take longer to resolve. So we have to keep coming back to what is that, for me, it's also, besides the water, is hiking, or going on a really, really long walk in the woods. And that's another place where I can find rest or deep quiet or listening and hit some kind of pause inside myself, where then I can have these talks with myself and say, hey, right, we're in a temporary place. It's not going to be like this forever. What kind of support do we need? Who do we need to reach out to, right?
Building your team. You mentioned your books, and so I want people listening to this to be able to find that. Can you share a little bit, the art of money, and you have the Art of Money workbook. Where can people find that, and also what led you to sharing your work so openly?
So 2 books now, as you said, and the first one came out in 2016, The Art of Money, A Life-Changing Guide to Financial Happiness. And that's a 300-page book, so it's pretty meaty, and it's my entire methodology. So it's my financial therapy methodology that I've been teaching for 22 years, and it, integrates money healing, money practices, and money maps. I share all my tools and practices and tons of storytelling. I love telling stories, and it's in the first book. My stories of folks in the community. That's the first book. The second book is a workbook of about 200 pages of journaling exercises. So if you don't even know where to start, you go to that second book and ask yourself one question, or you go to your partner and you ask them one question, on a money date or out for dinner, and one question. There are many, many, many questions, also based on my money healing, money practices, and money maps, right, broken down. You can get those books everywhere online, as far as I know, Book Depository, if you live all over the world, Amazon. They're in a lot of local bookstores in the US and Canada. It's starting to be translated into other languages, which I'm really proud of. We've had Korean, we've had Chinese, Czech, Polish, and Spanish. It hasn't happened yet that I know of, but that's my goal for the year, is to have it translated into Spanish. Next feels essential, because I've always had Spanish speakers, in my community, and I've always had people from all over the world. So the reason I did those books is, day one, I was been teaching my work in groups, as I mentioned. So 22 years ago, my first group, 10 people in my living room. And then I just hit repeat. And each time would do it better and different and add in things that I missed, or I could, I realized about the body check-in. Oh, missed that, add that in. I realized we forgot about some kind of forgiveness, add that in with yourself, right? I just, I've been fine-tuning it in groups for years because I think we can learn so much from each other. We can unshame quicker. Not quicker. Some people need to do private work, but I just always wanted to do groups. It was also more affordable and more accessible, right, than private therapy. So my private financial therapy, I always open up 10 slots and that's it over the years, where groups I've, one after the next. I've always done it that way. And I used to always give free talks too on my work. And anywhere and everywhere, I'd get 50 people. I'd get 5 people. I never knew. And I did that over and over and over. But one of the very first talks, someone stood up and said, well, when's the book coming? And I just said, soon. So
you committed.
Well, I always knew that there would be a book. I just did. And when I started, I had a co-writer at the time. I've always had people help me with writing because I'm such a storyteller, and I love the tools and practices, and I love directly working with people, and I can create an entire outline but I need someone to write it. And then we go back and forth with every word and every sentence and every paragraph. But I've always needed writing and editing help, and so I've worked with 3 different people over the last 22 years. And I was working with a woman who we started creating the book proposal, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And then I had a woman named Rachel Newman, who is running a small publishing house, Parallax Press, call me and say, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I said, well, yes, we're in the middle of creating the book proposal. And she said, send that over. And within 6 weeks, I had my first book deal. So that's how that happened. And there may just be a third, book on the horizon. It's being discussed, which is exciting for me. Yeah.
Wow, I can see how proud you are of what you've created, but also what an impact this have made in people's lives. What is there that's inspiring you when you think about the future of your work and as a somatic practitioner and your financial therapy work?
Great. I want to answer one more thing about the book, and then I'll move into that. So we just surpassed 30,000 copies for my first book, wow. Which I've always had a small list. I have 10,000 people on my email list. My social media is not huge, but we've sold 30,000 books. That's I think, for a first-time author and for a personal finance book that, incorporates somatic tools in it. I was very happy to see that. That happened December of 2022. So what's on the horizon for me is this third book, right? Which I won't say anything more about yet. But really what's on the horizon is I teach 2 programs now. And for years, I just had the one program. It's my year-long program. It takes you through my 3 phases of my methodology. It's really for everyone, right? At all different income levels. And there's always therapists and financial professionals in there, but it's moms and it's everyone, right? In that year-long program, it's a lower price point program that's always available, that year-long program. And I've been doing it for 22 years, but the year-long I've been doing for 12 years. So, okay, so there's that. But then,
and this is virtual, so someone from South Africa would be able to join. Oh yeah, if you can figure out the time zone.
Oh yeah, well no, that's the thing. You don't even need to figure out the time zone. So all of my content is in the online teaching area. So the 12 modules that break down money healing into 4 months, or 4 modules, money practices, it's all in this online teaching area. Right. So all the content, the audio, the written, everything's there. My library, it's all on the teaching platform. The support is twofold. Again, it's a lower price point program, right? But there is some live community support. There's a Saturday co-working. So what time is it for you right now? So
it's just after 8:00.
Okay, so European time. All right. So we have tons of folks on European time, and so it's a morning session, and we have folks, right, who it's the evening for them, and they attend that. Or even And that's weekly with my alumni guides. They host that. And then once a month, I do an office hours. And that's also at a time like this where it's evening for you. So you can, you're total. Yes, you can join all of that. The thing that's really exciting is that for years, people have asked me to do some kind of certification in my financial therapy method. And I kept researching it over and over and over. And I kept coming to no, I'm not doing it because I don't want people under my umbrella. That's just, I chose to get the master's degree, but then and did so much internship work, but then I chose to not be a licensed therapy because I didn't want to jump through more hoops. And I wanted to do my work in a different way. It was before online programs. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I just had some, a little bit of a rebel spirit in me, that I was like, there's another way. So if I don't like being under someone's umbrella, then why would I want people under mine, right? And so it took me a while. And I thought I would do this when I turned 50, but it wasn't until I turned 53 last year that I finally created the structure and the framework. And it's a 4-month mentor program for other therapists and coaches and financial folks. It's 16 Zoom calls. So it is going deeper in all of the themes that are in my books and in my year-long program. And originally I thought everyone had to take my year-long program as a prerequisite, but I decided not to do that. So I just charge a little more for people who've never taken my program. And then they get the 12 modules like all at once, where in the year-long, it's stripped out 1 month at a time, right? And we're professionals. So again, we're not going through that content 1 month at a time. We're going deeper in all the themes. And the goal there is threefold. One, to have a safe and brave space for financial professionals to do their own money work, right? We really, really, really need a place to talk about our money stuff. The good.
I love how you call it a brave space. Because in the transitionist work, one of the protocols is also to create a safe space. But there's something more to it when we call it a brave space.
I've just started adding in brave to safe in the last year. Yes. So I love that you caught that. A safe and brave spaces. And second is to learn more tools and practices to bring to your clients. Again, if you're an estate planner, therapist, social work, they'll be different, but right, we're learning that in the space. And then the third is to create healthier businesses or practices around pricing and business models. That's the third thing. So I'm on my second run of this. I'll do another one at the end of 2023. It's a small group. The first round, we had 40 people. The second round, 17. I think this next group will be something in the middle. And I'm loving this. I'm really, really loving mentoring other therapists and financial professionals in my work. This is something I love.
What's the feedback that you received from that first group of professionals that's now gone through this? What changed for them after they've completed this?
We had them fill out an intake. Not everyone did. I wish everyone would fill out intake forms, but that's not how it goes. And we mostly got really, really positive reviews. Everything from it was the best money I've ever spent on any financial training or financial education or any business training or business education. So that was great. That it was the most well spent money, right? Our intake was really detailed. Tell us one new somatic tool you learned and how you're using it with yourself, with your clients. Tell us one new money tool you're learning to use with yourself. Tell us aha moments. So there is so much, there is so much in there. I would have to go back. So I don't, we always grab testimonials from that. And then that's what's on our program page or sales page is what did people say? I have a hard time repeating that back, even though it's not so much praise. It's also just like, this is what they got, this is what they got from doing the work. Oh my God. I mean, there's so many, I would have to go look to see.
Bari, I like how when we talk to people to say, hey, this is the work that we need to do. Now you have created something practical and you've said, hey, this is actually what it means to do the work, right? Either self-paced or through this group.
Yeah. I mean, even with my first program, when people say, well, what are the results they get? And I'm like, my God, it's everything from they're not fighting with their spouse anymore around money. they're sitting down and having loving and compassionate money conversations. Or, yeah, they're learning to save for the very first time. And it's not just they're learning to save, but they got to understand why they've been so afraid to save or been so resistant to save. Thinking about the future has brought up so much for them, some people learn how to pay down debt. There's a lot of practical things that they learn, but they also learn that their money emotions aren't going to necessarily go away, but now they have tools to meet those challenging moments. And so the money emotions are decreased, or they're smaller, or they're not as scary, or, this is always an interesting question. Like, what are the results? Because we could talk for hours about what people get by doing this work. And it's so different where someone begins and where they end, and if they've done therapy before or not. And right. So there's quite a...
And that's also even the results that they have noticed, right? It might not be the things that they haven't noticed or that's not as obvious, just the way they're showing up in their client meetings.
Which is, well, for the program, it's the way they're showing up, the way they feel more confident in themselves, in their work, in their value, in the way that they price things, in their business models. They feel more, in the tools that they're bringing to their clients and what they're noticing in their clients and how they're able to support them and hold their hands better. For therapists, it's just that they can talk about money in the first place in the sessions, which is really like, and back in the day, if you brought up money stuff, therapists did not know how to support someone because they hadn't done their own work. They hadn't done their own work around their own money relationships. So it's so essential you understand your biases, your strengths, your challenges, your triggers. It does not mean that one day we will be done with our money work. This is a lifelong journey and we'll be fine-tuning forever. But we can get the tools and practices to meet these curveballs, to meet these big emotions, to meet when we're going into overwhelm. And that's what I'm teaching.
I think that's such a beautiful way for us to end this conversation. Thank you so much for creating these rich resources. For someone that wants a little bit more information, what would be the best place for them to go?
Go to my website, baritessler.com, get on my email list. And if you get on my email list, you get a little taste of my financial therapy methodology, which you'll see referred to sometimes as the art of money. You'll learn about money healing, money practices, money maps. Once a week, I send out a newsletter. Sometimes it's a new article. Next week, I'm going to be sharing my relationship with my mom. We just went on a trip together, and more about my money story with her and her money story. I'll be sharing that. Sometimes I share a podcast interview, right? Or go get one of my books or both of my books and begin there.
Thank you so much, Bari. I wish you all the best for your third book and the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope that was helpful and interesting to your community. And I think we just touched the surface, but thank you so much.